what he was doing, and this goes for a lot of the work on art and on the painting, had really to do with my own relationship with the painters. I mean, all of the painters on whom I wrote were people whom I interacted with, came to know very well, discussed things with them, discussed materials, discussed techniques. And Stanley Greaves, for instance, was painting the black sunflowers in his office, in his place at UG, at a time when we were all up there, people like Lehman, Martin, Bill Carr. I mean, this was a time when the university was probably its last flowering, really. Right. Martin was writer in residence. Stanley was painting downstairs. Bill was, entertaining us somewhere else. Michael Aaron was there. It was a very extraordinary period. And Stanley was painting black sunflowers. So I would go down every day and watch him paint black sunflowers. Right. I became absolutely fascinated with really the application of paint and the techniques and that kind of thing. And a lot of what I've done in relation to art had a lot to do with my relationship with Stanley. And I recall we were both in Amsterdam one winter, and we went through the Rijksmuseum, and we went to the Vermeer room, and to walk through the Vermeer paintings which in Stanley's company, to see what it is he was taken with and that kind of thing, or to stand in front of the Rembrandt with Stanley for half an hour and have him worry about a particular fold in the painting and so on. It was really the most astonishing kind of art education you can possibly have. So a lot of what I came to do later on, Akeym-I and Ishi and so on, again, painters who I came to know in Barbados and who I came to know quite well, and again spent a lot of time in their studios while they were working on particular pieces and that kind of thing. My interest in it really had a lot to do with technique and materials. I was very, very interested in technique and materials, the application of paint and so on, how to achieve particular results and so on. So a lot of what I concentrated on in the pieces I wrote on art had a great deal to do with technique and with the achievement of particular effects.
Like going to Cuba and learning how to use whatever's available because you can't get the paint.
That's right.
And the string and the classical. But I think you're downplaying the level of analysis that you bring. I mean, you remind me a lot of John Berger and of Jeff Dyer.
I'm a great admirer of Jeff.
And because you seem to be able to move beyond the... there's a certain frisson describing the use of colors and tones and so on. But then there's this wider frame of reference that you bring to it, which is a sort of cultural and political one. And it's very striking reading it because the absence of that critical voice has been one of the most desperate facets of the post-Burnham era in Guyana. It seemed that even during the Burnham years it was still there. And then it's gone. It's been exported. And you are one of the few remaining sort of figures who could bring this. Now, the Ishi profile, a rather long quote, but I'm hoping it'll lead into something. You say, for Ishi, the isolation is the necessary condition not only of the artist struggling to create in an environment he finds inhospitable, but also of the human person marooned in a world of uncertainty and shifting relations, driven to a continuously renewed search for wholeness, for the essential integrity of being in the world, which is a Heideggerian phrasing, I noticed. Isolation is desolation, but it is also consolation. And this is the line that I'm leading to. It is the withdrawal into self, for the journey inward to the life-giving sources of energy. It is the condition from which the fetters on the forces of being are to be unlocked. And the way you describe this, and you go on to say that it's a very West Indian condition, the artist in retreat to the inner sources of the self. Something that could be applied to Aubrey Williams, to Wilson Harris, to a lesser extent to someone like Martin. I just wondered if you could sort of take it from there and say what you have in mind.
I mean, to the extent that what is out there is somehow unsatisfactory, not fulfilling, you have an antagonistic relationship to what surrounds you. There is nothing coming from it to you that is particularly energizing or enriching, and you are driven inwards, literally, and driven inwards to considerations of self, considerations of things which you, in a more comfortable environment, would not be driven to contemplate. This was in Barbados, and Ishi and Akeym really were living in an environment where they were not appreciated. They're Rasta people were living in a kind of urban subculture, not Ishi so much as Akeym. Akeym is a very urban painter, as opposed to Ishi, who was very rural. But both of them felt unappreciated, that what was out there in Barbados was, this plantation thing. Philistinism, and so on. And they were driven to these explorations, which they would not otherwise have been driven to. In a more comfortable environment where they felt appreciated and so on, there wouldn't have been that kind of, extraordinary drive that they both had. Akeym would, find refuge in mythology and so on. Not so Ishi. Ishi really went deeper into more existential issues of the self and so on. And my feeling is that, in a strange way, the Philistinism and the unpromising environment in which they were operating had in effect provided them with the drive to look into themselves much more deeply and to explore things that they found in there. And that's what I found particularly in Ishi.
Which is a theme that seems to recur throughout the book, that you look at these homegrown talents, as people would put it patronizingly, and you find that they have imaginations that are extremely in line with high modernism. I mean, Ishi is quoting from the Guernica hands. He's got a bit of Magritte's pipe, and that's just the two obvious ones. And they've got Basquiat deletions, and they're putting this in front of an audience in Barbados that prides itself on being cultured and knows not one of these references. And it seems to be a theme throughout your critical attention that not just in Guyana but throughout the Caribbean, people are taking a very patronizing view of their creative class from colonial hangovers, like they're black artists, so what could they possibly know? Or, the Philip Moore thing, the decoding of Philip Moore. 50 years on, we're meant to be past this sort of thing, aren't we? But clearly not. I mean, when will it pass? Will people look at a painting like Ishi and say to themselves, the only thing missing is this hanging in the Rijksmuseum, because then I'd give it the proper attention? Are we ever going to get to that stage?
As it happens, there's been a lot of validation of people like Akeym and Ishi.
Because they've been hung in the right, or something like it. But,
that's
the old syndrome, isn't it?
Yes, it is. The validation doesn't come from the society in which they live. It's a validation they get in Havana,
and the Biennale, and so
on, and then they come home. They've both been fairly fortunate in that they have found a small, circle of collectors who have been buying their paintings. But one of the things at the moment in Barbados, as we speak now, the art scene, some of the best little studios have closed, and there is no market really for painting. Stanley, as you know, lived for many years in Barbados. He told me Barbados was his studio. He had no relation to anything out there whatsoever. And he lived there and battled a lot of this, and eventually left, to some frustration and despair. But The fact is that, and I think this is the real point, that we don't seem to have evolved or developed in the region, in particular territories. Cuba is the single exception, I must tell you. But in the Anglo-Caribbean, Anglophile Caribbean and so on, we don't seem to have really developed the environment, what I think of as an environment of appreciation, an environment that essentially encourages art, encourages explorations of one kind or another, so that your artists, whether writers or painters, sculptors, are living in environments that are not, to my mind, really refreshing them. Mm-hmm. And I say the big exception is Cuba. When we went to Havana, this was a time when I was making a documentary on Caribbean art, and we went to a number of territories with a film crew. We went to Guadeloupe and Martinique and Suriname and Havana, and it was really quite astonishing that you would visit we visited a number of Cuban painters and sculptors, and of course they have the ISA there, which is the Instituto de Artes Superior, and that's where Ishi and Akeym actually spent some time. And what you found with these artists, you went to their homes, and there were just piles of paintings, sculptures, and everything.
They were living it.
They were living it, and in a very real sense, the encouragement that was being given, not only by the state, but by the schools, the school system, and so on, was really quite something to behold. And that's not something that we found anywhere else.
And yet, Trinidad, which is by many measures the most Philistine culture I know, has had this fantastic resurgence of interest in culture.
Yes.
I mean, that wonderful Bocas Lit Fest.
Yes.
Peter Doig is at work out there. They've got Chris Cozier, and the thing is, they've always had these guys, and now they're suddenly paying attention to them. And I mean, it's a wash with money. There's lots of shallowness to go around, but suddenly there's an interest in foreign films, in books, and so on. So what have they done right that we are not doing?
That's difficult to say. I don't know enough about Trinidad to understand the difference. I know Carifesta is coming up. We had Carifesta here. I don't know that we had any long-term benefits from it. Mm-hmm. You would think that once you mount that kind of operation, that there would be downstream effects, that it would leave something behind. I'm not aware that our Carifesta experience has been of that kind. I don't know what it is they have done better in Trinidad. I think that
it's palpable, though. You agree?
Yes.
There's an energy in the audiences, and
I was pretty astonished at the Bocas Festival, I must say. And yes, we should interrogate what it is that they have been doing to produce that kind of environment.